Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at Preah Khan Temple. And wow, you really came through with the sources this time. Ancient chronicles, LiDAR scans, expert architectural analysis. It's like we've got every tool imaginable to unlock the secrets of this place.
And it's amazing what we can learn about a civilization from its structures, especially when they're as intricate and as grand as Preah Khan.
Right.
What's really captivating about this temple is that it's not just a temple. It was a city, a religious center, and even a university all rolled into one.
Okay, a city within a temple. That's already blown my mind. I'm picturing like bustling hub of activity, monks, scholars, officials, maybe even a marketplace.
Yeah, you're not far off. The foundation stela, which is basically this massive inscribed stone slab that was like a dedication record for the temple, tells us that Preah Khan was home to nearly 100,000 people.
Wow, 100,000 people. That's the size of a small city today. So where did they all live? Were there actual like residential areas within the temple complex?
That's one of the things that makes studying Preah Khan so fascinating. There's still so much we don't know for sure. The stela mentions all these different roles and professions, from priests and teachers to dancers and cooks, but it doesn't really give us a detailed layout of the living quarters. That's where those other sources come in.
So we can use things like the LiDAR scans and the architectural analysis to fill in the gaps, like a giant historical jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. And what those sources reveal is that Preah Khan wasn't just like a haphazard collection of buildings. It was meticulously planned and laid out with this whole complex network of courtyards, enclosures, and passageways.
Wow.
It's like a city within a city with different zones dedicated to different functions.
Okay, I'm already starting to appreciate the level of planning and organization that went into this place. It's mind-boggling to think they achieved all of this without, modern technology.
It truly is a testament to their ingenuity. And speaking of ingenuity, let's talk about how they actually built this place. We're talking millions of tons of sandstone transported from quarries kilometers away.
Okay, now that's what I call a logistical nightmare. I can't even imagine trying to move a single one of those massive blocks, let alone thousands of them.
Yeah, it's a question that has puzzled scholars for centuries, and it's where those LiDAR scans really come in handy.
Okay.
They've revealed this incredible network of canals and waterways that connected the quarries to Angkor.
So they use the waterways to their advantage, almost like a superhighway for sandstone blocks. But even with the waterways, those blocks were still ridiculously heavy, right? How did they actually maneuver them into place?
Well, they had some clever tricks up their sleeves.
Okay.
First, they used a locally sourced material called laterite for the foundation. Laterite is much softer and easier to work with than sandstone.
So it's like using a quick-set base to speed up the construction process.
Exactly. It saved them a lot of time and effort. Then, for those massive sandstone blocks, they used a system of wooden pegs and ramps. Archaeologists have actually found evidence of this at other Angkorian temples like Phun Buk Heng.
I'm trying to picture this. So they insert these wooden pegs into the sides of the blocks, almost like handles, and then use ramps to haul them up.
That's a general idea. It would have been a massive team effort requiring incredible coordination and precision.
No kidding. And to think they did all of this without, modern machinery, it makes you appreciate the sheer skill and manpower involved in creating these monumental structures.
It really does. And it's a reminder that understanding Preah Khan, or any ancient structure for that matter, requires us to think beyond our modern assumptions.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the how and forget about the why.
So speaking of why build something on this scale? What was the purpose of Preah Khan?
Well, that's where the foundation stela provides some valuable clues. Remember we said it was a city, a religious center, and a university?
Well, it turns out that Preah Khan was dedicated to the king's parents, and it also served as a major Buddhist learning center.
A Buddhist university inside a temple. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I had no idea that education was such a central part of life in the Khmer Empire.
It was, and it reflects the sophisticated and complex nature of this civilization.
Yeah.
The foundation stela mentions over 1,000 teachers residing at Preah Khan, which suggests that education was highly valued.
Wow, over 1,000 teachers. That's a serious faculty. It makes you wonder what kind of subjects they taught. The curriculum was like. Did they have libraries, lecture halls?
Unfortunately, the foundation stela doesn't give us those specifics, but it does mention this vast collection of sacred texts, which suggests that religious studies were a central part of the curriculum.
That makes sense given the temple's setting. But I imagine they also taught practical subjects like medicine, astronomy, and agriculture, right?
Most likely. We know from other sources that the Khmer Empire was highly advanced in these fields. For example, they had sophisticated irrigation systems and a deep understanding of the stars.
So Preah Khan wasn't just a place of worship. It was a center of knowledge and innovation, driving the progress of the entire empire.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that when we study these temples, we're not just looking at stones and carvings.
Yeah.
We're looking at a snapshot of a dynamic and complex civilization, a society that valued both spiritual and intellectual pursuits.
Okay, I'm officially in awe of the Khmer Empire. But let's get back to the temple itself. We've talked about the incredible scale and the ingenious construction techniques, but what about the design? What can the architecture tell us about their beliefs and their worldview?
Ah, that's where things get really interesting. Preah Khan, like many Angkorian temples, follows the symbolic layout known as a mandala. Imagine a square with 4 gates representing the cardinal directions, and a central point symbolizing Mount Meru, the mythical home of the gods.
Okay, I've heard of mandalas before, but I'm having trouble picturing how that translates to a physical structure like Preah Khan.
Well, think of the temple's outer enclosure wall as the square, with the 4 gopuras, those monumental gateways, marking the cardinal points.
All right.
At the center of the complex is the main sanctuary, representing Mount Meru. It's like the temple itself is a microcosm of the universe.
Wow, so it's not just a building, it's a symbolic representation of their entire cosmology. That's incredible.
It is, and it's a reminder that every detail, from the layout to the carvings, was carefully considered and imbued with meaning.
Okay, I'm starting to realize that understanding Preah Khan is like learning a whole new language, a language of symbols and architectural metaphors.
You're exactly right. And that's what makes studying these temples so rewarding. It's like peeling back layers of history and meaning, uncovering a world that's both familiar and utterly alien.
Speaking of uncovering, I've got to ask about those incredible carvings that adorn Preah Khan. I've seen photos of these intricate bas reliefs, and they're just breathtaking. What can you tell us about them?
Those carvings are one of the most captivating aspects of Preah Khan, and they offer a wealth of information about Khmer art, mythology, and everyday life.
Okay, so they're not just pretty decorations, they're telling stories, right?
Right.
What kind of stories are we talking about?
Well, you'll find scenes from Hindu epics like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, as well as depictions of Buddhist deities and narratives. There are also carvings that show scenes from daily life, courtly processions, battles, market scenes, even musicians playing instruments.
Wow, so it's like a visual encyclopedia of Khmer culture.
Yeah.
And the level of detail is just incredible. How did they achieve that level of precision with the tools they had?
It's truly remarkable.
Yeah.
They used a variety of chisels and hammers to carve the sandstone, and the level of skill and artistry is evident in every stroke. Remember, these carvings weren't just meant to be admired from afar. They were designed to be experienced up close, to draw the viewer into the narrative.
I can only imagine how awe-inspiring it must have been to walk through these corridors, surrounded by these intricately carved scenes, as if the stories were coming to life around you.
It must have been a truly immersive experience, and it's another reminder that when we study Preah Khan, we need to engage all of our senses.
Right.
To imagine not just what we see, but what we might have heard, smelled, and even felt.
That's a great point. It's easy to forget that these temples were once vibrant, living spaces filled with the sounds of chanting, music, and the bustle of daily life.
Exactly. And it's those sensory details that can truly bring the past to life for us.
Okay, before we get too lost in our time-traveling fantasies, let's take a step back and consider something we haven't talked much about. The moat.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's a common feature of Angkorian temples, but what was its purpose beyond just being a pretty water feature?
Ah, the moat. It's more than just a decorative element. It played a crucial role in the structural integrity and longevity of these temples. You see, the sheer weight of those millions of tons of sandstone put immense pressure on the foundations.
Okay, I can see how that might be a problem. So how did the moat help?
Well, the moat, which was typically quite large and deep, ensured a constant supply of moisture to the sand and soil beneath the temple. This moisture prevented the foundation from drying out and shifting, which could have led to cracks and instability.
Ah, so it's like the moat was a giant humidifier for the temple's base.
Exactly. It's a brilliant example of the Khmer's understanding of engineering and their ability to work in harmony with the natural environment.
It's almost like they were using nature to help preserve their creations. What's even more impressive is that this simple solution has helped keep Preah Khan standing for nearly a millennium.
That's the beauty of these ancient structures. They're not just monuments to the past, they're ongoing experiments in resilience and adaptation.
I love that perspective. It makes you realize that studying these temples isn't just about understanding the past. It's about learning lessons that we can apply to the present and the future.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to approach these temples with a sense of curiosity and a willingness to challenge our assumptions.
Okay, you've definitely sparked my curiosity. I'm feeling inspired to dive even deeper into the world of Preah Khan. But before we do, let's take a quick break and then come back to explore some of the other fascinating features of this incredible temple, from its hidden passageways to its mysterious carvings.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, we'll be right back.
Yep.
All right, we're back and ready to continue our exploration of Preah Khan. Before the break, we were talking about the moat and how the Khmer really used their knowledge of nature to keep their buildings standing for, well, centuries. I'm really eager to explore more of those details, those things you might miss if you just stroll through the temple. What else should we be looking out for?
That's a great question. It is easy to get, overwhelmed by how massive Preah Khan is, but sometimes it's those little things that tell you the most. For example, let's talk about those passageways, the ones that kind of weave all through the temple.
Oh yeah, those. I've seen pictures, and they look almost like a labyrinth, all these corridors and hidden rooms.
Yeah.
What's the story there? Were they just for looks, or was there a practical reason for them?
Oh, they definitely had a purpose. Remember, this is a huge complex in a tropical climate.
Yeah.
Keeping the inside cool and comfortable would have been super important, especially with all the people living and working there.
Okay, so maybe those passageways were like an ancient air conditioning system.
Exactly. They were cleverly designed to control the light and the airflow, so it's like a natural ventilation system, keeping the temple cool and airy. Really shows how well they understood passive cooling techniques even back then.
Wow, so they were using architecture itself to manipulate the environment. That's brilliant. But I have to say, those passageways, beyond the practical stuff, they add a real sense of mystery to the temple.
You're right. There's a sense of discovery as you move through the space. Every turn reveals something new, like a different view or a hidden detail, almost like a built-in treasure hunt.
Speaking of hidden details, I've noticed in some pictures there are these doorways, but they're blocked off. They look like doors, but they don't actually lead anywhere. Why would they have doorways that don't go anywhere?
That's a question that has puzzled scholars for ages. There are a few theories, some symbolic, some more practical. One idea is they represent gateways to other realms, like the realm of the gods or the ancestors.
Okay, that's a pretty mystical interpretation. But I can see how it fits with the whole symbolism of the temple, the mandala design representing the cosmos and everything.
Exactly. But there are also more down-to-earth theories. Some think these blind doorways might have been used to store statues or sacred objects, kind of sealed off for protection.
So they're like secret treasure chambers.
Could be. And there's another theory that maybe they were added later, to make the structure stronger or to create a more symmetrical look.
It's amazing how these, what seem like simple architectural features, can hold so much mystery. Like they're whispering stories from the past, challenging us to figure out what they mean.
That's what I find so fascinating about these temples. They make you think critically, question your assumptions, and really appreciate how complex the past can be.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the water systems. I know we talked about the moat, but Preah Khan also had all these channels and reservoirs and basins within the walls. It's like a mini city with its own water infrastructure. Why all that?
You're right. The Khmer were incredible at managing water, and they incorporated that knowledge into all parts of their lives, especially their religious buildings.
So these water features weren't just decorative. They had actual, practical uses.
Absolutely. They served so many purposes. First, they provided fresh water for drinking, washing, irrigation. I mean, think about it. This was a city of almost 100,000 people.
Right. They would have needed a really reliable water source to keep everyone going.
Yeah.
But those water features, they must have also had a symbolic meaning, right?
You're getting it. Water is super important in both Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. It symbolizes purity, renewal, the cycle of life.
So by incorporating all these elaborate water systems into the temple, they weren't just meeting their daily needs,
right,
but also expressing their spiritual beliefs and connecting with the natural world.
Exactly. And again, it reminds us that when we look at these temples, we need to consider both the practical and the symbolic.
Okay, this is really making me see how much thought and planning went into Preah Khan's design. It wasn't just about making something beautiful. It was about creating a space that reflects their whole worldview, their beliefs, and their connection to the universe.
And that's what makes these temples so powerful. They're not just remnants of the past, they're expressions of a civilization's hopes and values, what they held most dear.
Okay, I'm feeling so inspired to learn more. But I have a confession. When I was researching Preah Khan, I came across this whole debate online about a carving that some people think is a stegosaurus. Have you heard of this?
Yeah. Oh, the Stegosaurus carving. Yeah. It's one of the most talked about details at Preah Khan, and it's a great example of how easy it is to misunderstand the past, especially if you're looking for things that confirm what you already believe.
So, is there really a dinosaur carved on the walls of Preah Khan? I have to admit, that would be pretty mind-blowing.
Well, let's just say most archaeologists and paleontologists aren't convinced.
Okay.
It does look a bit like a Stegosaurus, those plates along the back and all, but there are probably more likely explanations.
Like what?
Some think it's a stylized carving of a rhinoceros or some other animal that's native to Southeast Asia. You have to remember, these carvings wear down over time, so the details can get distorted.
Right, so what might have once looked like a rhino horn could now look more like a stegosaurus plate. Makes sense. But it's still fun to imagine dinosaurs roaming around ancient Angkor, right?
It is. But it just shows how important it is to be a critical thinker when you look at these temples. It's easy to get carried away when you think you've made a discovery, but it's important to question what you see and consider different points of view.
That's a good reminder. It's all about asking questions and looking for evidence, not just jumping to conclusions.
Exactly. That's what makes studying Preah Khan, or really any historical site, so interesting and rewarding. It's not just about memorizing facts, it's about learning to think critically and appreciate how layered and complex the past is.
Okay, I'm putting on my detective hat.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Preah Khan as a Buddhist university. We mentioned before that the foundation stela talks about over 1,000 teachers.
Right.
But I'd love to know more about what that actually looked like. What was it like to be a student there?
Well, sadly, we don't have those specifics. There aren't any surviving textbooks or lecture notes from Preah Khan.
That's too bad.
Yeah. But we can get some ideas from what we know about Buddhist education in other parts of Southeast Asia during that time period.
Okay, so what do we think it was like?
Most likely, the classes at Preah Khan would have been a mix of religious and everyday subjects. Students would have learned about Buddhist teachings and philosophy, but also practical stuff like medicine, astronomy, math, and law.
So a well-rounded education, preparing them for life in the real world and their spiritual life.
Exactly. And it wasn't just for monks. We know from inscriptions at other temples that people from all walks of life, even regular folks and women, could get an education at these Buddhist universities.
Wow, that's really forward-thinking for back then. It really challenges the idea that ancient societies were super rigid and exclusive.
It does. And it shows us that education was seen as vital for the good of the whole society.
It makes you wonder what it would have been like to actually be a student at Preah Khan, wandering through those hallways, discussing philosophy with your classmates, learning from these wise teachers, all in the middle of this incredible building.
I can only imagine it must have been an amazing experience, both stimulating and transformative.
Okay, I am adding time travel to Preah Khan to my bucket list. But let's come back to the present for a minute. How can we use what we've learned today to better understand and appreciate Preah Khan?
That's a great question. I think the key is to think of Preah Khan not just as a bunch of old ruins, but as an unfolding story, waiting for us to discover it.
Okay, I like that. So how do we uncover that story?
First, do your homework. Read up on the history of the Khmer Empire, the kings who ruled, the whole religious and cultural context.
So put Preah Khan into its historical setting, get the bigger picture.
Right. Then when you actually go to the temple, or even just look at photos or take a virtual tour, pay attention to those little details. Look for patterns in the layout, the carvings, how they used space and light.
Be an active observer. Engage with the temple on all those different levels.
Exactly. Don't just walk through passively. Ask yourself questions. Try to make connections. Let your imagination go. What were the people who built this temple like? What did they believe? How did it feel to be in this space?
Like, we're detectives trying to piece together clues from the past to understand Preah Khan in a richer, deeper way.
And the more you learn, the more you realize that Preah Khan isn't just some relic of the past. It's a powerful example of human creativity and the limitless possibilities of the human spirit.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm booking a trip to Cambodia. But before we go, let's consider one last thing. How can we ensure that Preah Khan and all the other temples of Angkor are preserved for future generations?
That's a critical question. After all, these temples aren't just pretty to look at, they're part of our shared human heritage.
Yeah.
It's our responsibility to protect them.
So how can we help with those preservation efforts?
Lots of ways. You can support organizations like the World Monuments Fund or UNESCO who are actively working to conserve Angkor. Even a small donation can help fund restoration projects.
So put your money where your mouth is, right? Show your support for protecting these treasures.
Exactly. But it's not just about money. It's about being responsible tourists when we visit these places. Follow the rules, stick to the paths, and avoid doing anything that could harm the structures or the carvings.
Be mindful of our impact. Make sure these wonders can be enjoyed by generations to come.
Yes. And it's also about sharing what we learn, spreading awareness of how important it is to preserve our cultural heritage.
Okay, I'm ready to do my part. But before we wrap up, let's talk about one more fascinating detail of Preah Khan, the incredible carvings covering every surface. What can you tell us about those?
Ah, yes. The devatas. Those celestial beings you see on the walls, the pillars, everywhere. They're not just there to look pretty. They give us a glimpse into what the Khmer believed and how incredibly skilled their artists were.
I'm picturing these graceful figures all decked out in jewelry.
Mm.
What do these devatas represent? What's their role in the story of the temple?
Well, they embody beauty, grace, and divine power. They're often shown holding lotus flowers, which symbolize purity and enlightenment. Their presence brings this sense of peace and otherworldliness to the temple.
Like they're inviting you to leave your everyday world behind and enter this higher state of consciousness.
That's it. And think about their intricate clothes, their delicate faces, how they seem to float across the stone. It all speaks to the talent of those Khmer sculptors.
It's amazing how detailed they are, especially given the tools they had. It's like they breathed life into the stone.
I know, right? And those details can truly transport us to another time and place. We connect with the people who created this masterpiece, on a deeper level.
Okay, I'm seeing how much meaning is packed into these carvings. It's like we need a whole new visual language to truly understand them.
That's part of the beauty of exploring Angkorian art. It pushes us to look beyond the surface and really delve into the symbolism and the myths that shape their whole way of seeing the world.
Like a treasure hunt? Every detail, a clue leading us closer to the heart of a civilization.
And that's a journey worth taking, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground today, from the incredible size and engineering of Preah Khan to the tiniest details and symbols hidden in its walls. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface.
And that's the amazing thing. There's always more to discover, more layers to peel back, more mysteries to solve.
All right, I'm ready for more. But before we go any further, let's take a quick break. When we get back, we'll share some additional resources for anyone who wants to dive even deeper into Preah Khan and the wonders of Angkor.
Sounds great.
And we are back, ready to wrap up our amazing exploration of Preah Khan. I don't know about you, but I'm just in awe of this place and the people who built it.
Me too. It's easy to just focus on how massive and beautiful these temples are.
Right.
But for me, the most incredible thing is how they reflect the Khmer people's ingenuity and deep spirituality.
Absolutely. It's like every stone, every carving, every little passageway tells a story, inviting us into a world that's both familiar and completely different from our own.
And those are stories worth preserving. Before we jump into some resources for further exploration, I think it's important to talk about how we can protect these incredible sites for future generations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've talked about the challenges of conservation.
Right.
But what can we as individuals do to help with those efforts?
Well, one thing you can do is support organizations like the World Monuments Fund or UNESCO. They're actively working to preserve Angkor, and even a small donation can really help fund their restoration and conservation projects.
So it's about putting our money where our mouth is, showing that we care about protecting these irreplaceable treasures.
Exactly. But it's not just about the money.
Right.
It's about being responsible travelers when we visit these sites.
Yeah.
Respect the rules, stay on the marked paths, and avoid doing anything.
Very intact. Make sure these incredible places can be enjoyed by generations to come.
That's right. And it's also about sharing what we've learned, telling others why it's so important to protect our shared cultural heritage.
Okay, I'm ready to do my part.
Yeah.
Before we sign off, I know you've got some great resources for our listeners who want to dive even deeper into the world of Preah Khan and the Khmer Empire. What are your top picks?
Happy to share. If you're a visual learner, you have to check out the documentary series, The Civilization of Angkor. The filming is beautiful, the narration is great, and it covers pretty much everything, from the history of the Khmer Empire to the architecture of Angkor Wat and the amazing carvings at Bante Shrey.
Adding that to my watch list.
Yeah.
What about books?
A classic is Ancient Angkor by Michael Freeman and Claude Jacques.
Okay.
It's a really thorough guide to the temples with stunning photos and lots of detailed historical information. It's like having a personal tour guide in book form.
Perfect for anyone who loves to get into the nitty-gritty. Anything else?
For a more personal take on Cambodian history, I recommend First They Killed My Father by Lung Ung. It's a really powerful memoir about her experience surviving the Khmer Rouge regime.
That's an aspect of Cambodia we didn't really touch on in this deep dive, but it's so important to understand, right?
Absolutely.
It gives the temples this broader historical context, and it reminds us of the resilience of the Cambodian people.
I agree. And lastly, if you're looking for a virtual Angkor experience, check out the Google Arts and Culture online exhibit Angkor, Exploring the Wonders of Ancient Cambodia. You can zoom in on high-res images, explore 360-degree views, even virtually walk through some of the temples.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like having the temples at your fingertips. No plane ticket required.
Right. It's a great way to experience the magic of Angkor, even if you can't travel there right now. And hey, who knows, maybe it'll inspire you to book that trip to Cambodia someday.
You've definitely inspired me.
Yeah.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey. And I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this amazing world. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
Just this. Stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring. The world is full of wonder, and Angkor is proof of what humans can create when we combine ingenuity, artistry, and spiritual yearning.
So well said. And on that note, we'll say goodbye to the magnificent world of Angkor. Thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive.
Until next time.
See you then.